How's it going? Can everyone hear me? If you can hear me and if you can see me, please answer one in the call in the questions box. Can everyone hear me? I also have, oh, perfect. Seeing a bunch of ones. Will you guys please share where you're at in the world right now? I'm about to go ahead and jump in this. Right now, I'm actually in a hotel room. That's why the lighting's kind of funny in here. I'm actually in Birmingham, England right now. So it's 11:03 in the morning for me. Um, nice. We got a lot of people from Arizona, Oregon. We got all sorts of people. Got some Texas. Glad you can all hear me. I'm really excited to be with you guys tonight. I hope you're feeling good. Thanks for joining me. I think you're going to really have fun today. I'm going to share with you my screen in just a minute. I have an assistant who's kind of going to help moderate some of the questions and stuff, so I want to make sure she's here. Hey, Liz, can you hear me yet? I can't hear Liz yet, but that's all right. She'll jump on in a second. Trying to see if there's people who I recognize. Anyways, well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and we're going to go ahead and jump into this thing. So let me know if you guys can see my screen. Give me a 2 if you can see my screen. All right, I'm seeing 100 2s. All right, sweet. All right. Well, in this training, I'm going to show you how to take more action in the next 30 days than you potentially have in your entire life. I'm going to share with you some really cool science and a 4-step process that's going to allow you to be extremely motivated and in momentum throughout the entire year. It's a very different process than I would say how most people pursue goals, how most people pursue New Year's resolutions. I believe that by the time I get through this, it's going to be very obvious potentially why you've been stuck and how you can get through to the next level. So today's agenda is I'm going to show you exactly how to achieve more in the next 6 to 12 months than you probably have in a very long time. I'm going to show you how you can structure your year to have continuous motivation. It really has to do with the setup and the design and about how you approach things. Most people pursue their goals in a way that's very defeating. I'm going to teach you how to get past any emotional blocks that you have. I'm going to actually show you where your emotional blocks come from and how you can get past them. And if nothing else, what I want you to do is I want you to walk away from this training with a game plan for how you can make the next 6 months the best of your life. You're going to know how to live every single day in a peak state. And by the way, a peak state, according to Abraham Maslow, are those crucial moments where you have this shift in perspective. And those are the moments that are required to experience what's called self-actualization. And I want to show you not only how to have peak moments, but how you can live in a peak state every single day. And what a peak state is where you're completely aligned with your future self and you're living from that perspective. By the time we finish today, you're going to have a 4-step system that's going to allow you to have continuous momentum throughout the year. You're not going to get stuck at the end of the year because you're always going to be in a 3-month cycle where you're sprinting and recovering. And you're going to see how this works in a minute. Basically, what I need from you is I want you to take immediate action on what's most relevant to you in this training. If you don't take immediate action, then basically what you're doing is you're living in your past. Like, that's what's kind of funny about this is if you don't take action towards what you want, then you're fearing the uncertainty of moving forward, and you are literally living in the emotions of your past. It's your behavior that shapes your identity. Your behavior determines your confidence. Your behavior determines your motivation. And the truth is that all of these things are the opposite of conventional wisdom. Most people think that it's their identity that shapes their behavior. Most people think that it's confidence that creates success, but it's actually your behavior that creates your confidence. And most people think that motivation is what leads to positive behavior. It's the opposite. Motivation is an outcome. And so all of these things are shaped by your behavior. And that's why I want you to take immediate action on whatever is personally relevant to you in this training. I'm going to go through a lot of cool concepts, cool ideas, cool science. And hopefully through the process, you will have some, you'll actually feel the emotional kind of tug to do something. And then the thing is obviously you have to do it. So you have to take immediate action. So would you agree that if I gave you a system and some powerful strategies for immediately upgrading your life, you would have absolutely nothing to lose in trying them? if you think that if I share with you something pretty cool, this 4-step system, you'd have nothing to lose in trying it. I think the only thing that you would actually have to lose is the story that you're holding on to. I think that that's the thing that people lose when they make huge progress in their life, is they lose the story that's keeping them where they're at. They lose the emotional attachment to their pain and to the things that have kept them where they're at. Would you also agree that that you're not currently living up to your full potential, and that potentially you've been living more reactive and distractive than you want to be? And that if you got things dialed in, that you could 10x your progress that you're currently making. If you were living less reactively, if you were living more clear, if you had less distractions, and if you were operating at peak levels on a daily basis, could you 10x the progress that you're currently making? So my name is Benjamin Hardy. Since 2015, I've been the most read writer on medium.com. And although this site is actually changing an enormous amount, I actually posted something today kind of sharing my frustrations, but for a long time, this site was very much optimized for allowing the voice of the people to push the best content to the front. But now it's changing a lot. Medium's still an interesting place, but through being the top writer on medium.com, I've been able to become one of the fastest rising like influencers or self-improvement thought leaders ever, potentially. I've gone from 0 to over 400,000 email subscribers in the last 3 years, and I've done this while I've been a graduate student. I've become a best-selling author. Maybe some of you have seen Willpower Doesn't Work. That's actually a live video that me and JP Sears did. But I'd say more importantly than all this stuff is that I'm almost done with my PhD in organizational psychology. I've been growing my writing platform in my business as a PhD student. And for the last 3 years, my wife and I were foster parents of 3 kids. We actually adopted those kids recently, earlier this year, and now my wife's pregnant with twins. So in 1 year, I'm going to go from having 0 kids technically to having 5. It's going to be crazy. Actually, we're having our twin girls in 5 or 6 weeks from now. So if you have kids, throw out a 1 or 2, it's crazy. But the things I'm going to show you, the cool part and the thing that I'm really excited about in sharing this stuff with you is I know that you're busy. Like, if you're listening to this, whether you have a full-time job, whether you're a student, whether you're running a business, life is super busy and life is only getting faster and faster. The world's becoming increasingly distracting. And the reason I share with you my story is because I've been able to become, one of the fastest growing writers in the world. I've been able to write a best-selling book. I've been able to grow a very successful business, all while being a PhD student and while having 3 kids and now 2 more on the way. And I don't say that to brag. I'm just saying the system I'm going to show you will help you to make huge progress regardless of how busy you are. And ultimately, what you do when you start getting results and living in the results economy is that you can quickly turn your dream into a business. You can design and create your life. You can design and create your results such that you can get results very fast. That's why I called this training How to Achieve Your 10-Year Plan in the Next 6 Months. That is what I've been studying. That's what I was able to do. I was able to learn how to get the biggest results I wanted, let's just say in my writing career, in my business, fast. Because it's really a simple process. That's what I'm going to show you. So it wasn't really always this way for me. That's actually a picture of me back when I think I was 18 or 19 years old. I grew up in a pretty tough environment. There was lots of addiction in my family, and there was I love my family. I have such a great family, but we had our challenges growing up. And my guess is that you've probably had your challenges too. I was pretty lost. I barely graduated from high school. I was, the year after high school, I was playing video games about 15 hours a day. I was playing World of Warcraft. I didn't have a job. I was living at my cousin's house. And basically, my diet was Little Caesars and Mountain Dew. I was really not doing anything. I was directionless. I was stuck. Really, I was hopeless. I didn't really feel like I had any control of my life. And, basically my parents got divorced when I was 11. And from that time forward, I felt like my life became increasingly out of my own control. I watched it get more and more confusing. I watched myself become a person I didn't like. And basically by age 19, I was not really anywhere. I was just confused and I was distracted and I was avoiding reality. And so basically what I decided is I needed to get away. Like, my unhappiness became so obvious to me that I needed to leave. And so what I ultimately ended up doing was I ended up leaving. At age 20, I ended up shifting my environment. I shifted who I was. I shifted what I was doing. I ended up serving a 2-year humanitarian mission. And during this period of time, all of my time was spent helping other people. I was doing community service. I was helping people overcome their problems. I was mowing people's lawns. I was, doing all sorts of interesting stuff. But interestingly, during this time, I probably read during this time 50 to 100 books. And I documented all of my learning and all of my experience in my journal. And I actually learned during this period of time how to use my journal as a tool to achieve my goals, as a tool to flesh out my emotions. It was actually during this period of time, I was on the opposite side of the country. I had moved across the country. I was doing this different type of work. And through relationships and through experiences, I was able to actually relieve myself of my suppressed emotions, of all the trauma of growing up, of the pain that I'd gone through in my life. I allowed myself to heal from that. I learned how to use my journal to let go of things, and I helped other people. And so it was a profound experience. And when I came home from that experience, what was really interesting to me is that, well, basically I had a leader in that experience, a mission president. And he said, at the end of this experience, he said, Ben, when you go home from this experience, the worst thing you could do is go back to being the person you were when you came back. You just had so many transformational experiences. You've learned all these things. Why would you go back? But what was interesting is when I did go back, I immediately felt everything come back. Like I was a different person, but I went back to the same environment, same people, same friends, same emotions. And I knew that if I had stayed in that environment, I would have reverted back to who I was before. And so I had to continue my journey. I had to let go of my past and move forward. And so since then, I've been studying psychology, self-improvement, entrepreneurship, and this is all in the last like 8 or 9 years. I got back from that mission experience about 8 years ago. I've read well over 1,000 books. My writing's been read by over 50 million people in the last 3 years. I've had thousands of people go through my programs and courses. And way more importantly, I have an awesome life with my wife and my 3 kids, soon to be 5 kids. We live in Orlando and our lives are just great. I'm able to do the work I love, and I'm confident that no matter where a person is, no matter how stuck they are, that they can get help. And so my mission is to help people to get unstuck and to move forward and to learn the most optimal strategies for transforming their life. So given my experience, my education, I know that you can transform your life with the right ideas, the right environment, the right commitments. I did it, and I know that I've helped other people do it as well. Like this is a person in one of my programs. This is Diane. She said, Ben Hardy's 1-year course is profoundly life-changing in overt and subtle ways. I've improved my overall social confidence, my sense of connection and insight to myself, as well as with my family of origin and my suppressed emotions through journaling. So I don't know if you've actually used your journal, if you've learned how to use your journal to not only like let go of your past, but to create your future. If you have, share some thoughts in the comment box, or at least say yes or no, because the journal and morning visualization and these types of tools and then powerful action is how you overcome the past and how you can design your future. So Misty's another person in my course, and through these techniques, she said that, if you have dreams, they can become a reality. Attention activates intention. The approach is to grow and stretch every single day and to generate awareness in ourselves and to shift our personal power and connection to our higher purpose. And really, one of the reasons to journal in the morning and really just to actually move forward is that it provides immediate attention to what you want. There's a really good quote from Dan Sullivan, and he basically says that the brain cannot find what it's not looking for. And in psychology, that's a concept called selective attention. But if you're not constantly like setting things up so that you're finding what you're looking for, then you're going to be living reactively to your environment. So change doesn't really have to happen as long as it doesn't need to take a really long time. You simply need to be very honest and clear about where you are, about what's holding you back, and then you need to have a system that propels you forward. And so that's what I'm going to share with you exactly how to do on this webinar. I'm going to show you how you can get immediate clarity in your life. I'm going to show you how to focus on only the things that matter to you. I'm going to show you how you can upgrade your environment to match your dreams and your goals. I'm going to show you how to become an agent that proactively creates rather than an object that reactively consumes. Almost everyone on this planet, because it's, because of globalization and addictive habit-forming technologies, people are becoming reactive and addictive consumers. I'm going to show you how to master your time and how to create a compelling vision for your future that actually works, which means that it compels you to transform all aspects of your life. I'm going to show you how to live your ideal future in the here and now so that you can create that future. As Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict your future is to create it, and you can actually live from your future. You can design and emotionally create that future and then act from that future right now, and that transforms everything in your life. Most people, though, are living and acting from their past, and I'm going to share with you why in a second. So I'm going to also show you how to develop a powerful tolerance for uncertainty, where you become very comfortable with the unknown. In order to actually create the future you want, you have to step into the unknown. The unknown is uncertainty is literally the foundation of all fear. The reason people stay in addictions that destroy their lives is because those addictions are at least certain. They know that if they perform a certain behavior, they're going to get a certain outcome. And if you step out of out of certainty, out of predictability, then what's going to happen? You step into this new place with new emotions, and that freaks people out. But in psychology, there's a concept called tolerance for uncertainty or tolerance for ambiguity, and that's something that you can get really good at. It requires emotional regulation techniques, and it requires a system so that you can keep going. I'm going to show you how to shift negative subconscious patterns and let go of suppressed emotional blocks, and how to become the master of your own motivation and confidence. Like I said before, this is a quote from a Harvard psychologist, Dr. Jerome Bruner. You're far more likely to act yourself into feeling than feeling yourself into action. This is why immediate action is so important, is that if you wait until you're motivated, it's probably not going to happen. If you're waiting until you're feeling excited to take a risk, it's not going to happen. If you're waiting until you're comfortable with uncertainty, it's not going to happen. You have to act, and then the feelings come. The feelings that, the motivation. You can't wait until you're feeling up for it. You have to create that emotional state. You have to become the master of your emotions. You're also going to learn how to experience radical gratitude and live into a peak state every day. That's something that is just amazing. It's so fun because when you're embracing huge goals, when you're embracing the unknown, you can actually do it while feeling really good, because you're so grateful for what you have, and you're even grateful for the fact that you're doing it, and you're actually grateful for the fact that you're going to succeed. And that allows you to live into a peak state where you're totally operating at this high level, despite the fact that you're living in the unknown, because you're taking huge risks, because you're constantly growing, because you're moving forward. And finally, and ultimately, I want to just, through this training, I want to show you that you can love your life and you can love where it's going. So if you're ready, I'm going to jump into it now. If you're not changing, then you're not actually living. This is one of my favorite quotes. Anyone who isn't embarrassed of who they were last year probably isn't learning enough. And this is what Albert Einstein said. He said, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. And so right at the get-go, I want you to take a look. Take a look right now at your life 6 months ago. How different are you? If it's not something that, if you haven't gone through a lot, and if you're not embarrassed in a lot of ways by where you were, then are you really learning? Are you really taking on big challenges? What about 12 months ago? Where's your life versus where it's at now? Is it pretty much the same, or are you taking on huge challenges? Are you going through huge growth? Are you fundamentally moving forward? If you're not, if your life is pretty much a replica of where it was a year or 2 or 5 years ago, then you're not actually learning your lessons. You're just repeating the past. Every day is a repeat rather than an intentional moving forward. And chances are you're stuck in some emotional block. So these are the reasons why people get stuck. Number one is that they're in continuous environments that hold their current self together. Most people are living from their past, not from their desired future. They don't actually have a system in place. They're not actually continuously creating a future and then moving towards that future. As human beings, our physical bodies become addicted to emotional states. So, one just really easy example is dopamine from technology. We have such a dopamine-rich environment that our physical body, which is our subconscious mind, takes over, and we find ourselves going through subconscious loops. Like if you've ever just picked up your phone without thinking about it, and then you catch yourself and you're like, how'd I do that? That is basically your body addicted to neurochemicals, to chemicals in the brain. And that's what keeps people in loops. what's his name? James Clear just came out with a really good book called Atomic Habits, and he talks a lot about how this works. It's really simple, but there's like a cue in your environment, and then there's like this impulsive reaction and a reward because of what it does in your brain. And the only way to get out of that subconscious system is to design your environment and to live from your future rather than living out your past. So basically, most people are living unconsciously and reactively every single day. And the reason for this is really interesting. So your brain and your body want to predict the future more than anything. Your brain is a prediction machine. And so it does not want things to be uncertain. It wants things to be predictable. It wants things to be how they are. And this is actually, interestingly, why people get stuck, is because they want their future to be predictable. And emotionally, people want their lives to feel stable. They want things to feel certain. They want things. The hardest thing for people to do is to do something where the outcome is uncertain. There's actually some really funny videos. Like basically, anyone who's trying to break social norms. I forget what the video is, but there's this awesome Netflix documentary where this guy breaks social norms. And one of the things he did was he went to McDonald's and he just went up to the order clerk and he started kind of like ordering something really like ridiculous. And before the lady had any time to respond, he ran away because he was scared, because he didn't know what was going to happen. And the idea is just kind of this, it's really just funny how much human beings want things to be certain and predictable. Like that is the thing that keeps people stuck. That's in a lot of ways the bubble that people live in, is their realm of predictability. But according to neuroscience, the only way to actually learn is to experience what are called prediction errors. So the most easy example is little kids when they touch the hot stove. Like when a kid touches a stove, they experienced something that they predicted incorrectly. Like they touched it because they didn't think it was going to be hot. And once it burned them, what that does is it creates an intense memory that's permanent. And that memory is based on an emotional experience, which then creates new learning, which then shapes future behavior. And so the only way to actually learn new things is to experience errors in your current prediction of the future. And if you think that you understand the world, especially with how fast it's changing, then you're living in a very small bubble. You're living in a bubble that's predictable based on your current environments, your current beliefs, your current emotions. And probably if your life is hyper predictable, then you're not moving forward enough. You're not experiencing enough prediction errors. You're not creating new memories, which reshape your identity. The only way to actually be free is to embrace uncertainty. If you're only doing things which are certain, then you're not actually attempting something that could fail. You're not doing something that might not work. And I think I have it later in the slides, but Kobe Bryant's a really good example of this. When Kobe Bryant was young, and he was recently interviewed on Lewis Howes, but basically his first year playing basketball, he scored 0 points. And he was a failure. He was a loser. He was horrible at basketball at age 11. And the reason why is because he was too afraid to fail. But something happened that was super important at the end of his year. His father grabbed him and looked him in the eyes and he said, "Son, whether you scored 0 points or 60, I would still love you." And basically what happened to Kobe Bryant after that moment, that was a transformational experience for Kobe that he still remembers. That was one of those moments that created a memory and an emotional experience that now shapes his identity. If you've ever seen the movie Inside Out, there's this concept of core memories. Those core memories make up your personality. And you can actually create those experiences which then shape your core memories. But basically for Kobe, what happened was he realized that his dad's love for him was unconditional. And because he felt protected in that relationship, he was then able to embrace uncertainty. He was then able to fail and experiment and be curious and be imaginative. And so what happened was he then started failing. He started pushing his boundaries. He stopped playing it safe, and he experienced a lot of prediction errors. Let's just say that. He stepped out of his small box of behavior. And if you just think about Kobe at age 11, not scoring any points, there's a reason. It's because he was living safe. He didn't want to step into uncertainty where he could fail. And really, just like a person in addiction, the reason people don't step out of their boxes is because they don't know what's going to happen. And basically, this moment for Kobe was the moment where he stopped stopped fearing. He stopped caring. And he was willing to fail, willing to imagine a bigger future. And the next year he became amazing. And ultimately we know what happened. And he said that his father implanted in his mind an intense curiosity and imagination for what was possible. And so because he felt protected, he was willing to embrace the uncertainty of stepping out of his zone and failing. And so he was willing to be free. Oliver Wendell Holmes, and this is one of my favorite quotes, said, "A mind that is stretched by new experience can never go back." That's what happened to Kobe. That's what happens to a little kid when they touch the stove. That's why learning requires having new experiences, having new, intensely emotional experiences that shape and reshape your memory and identity is how you learn. And when you have those experiences, you can't go back. You can't go back to an old system that no longer exists. And so a question I have for you is, when was the last time you had an experience that reshaped your mind so much that you couldn't go back? Buckminster Fuller basically said that once you have new experiences, or he said really that the only way to make a system obsolete is by creating a new one that totally uproots it. And that's what you do with your memory and with your mind when you have these prediction errors, when you experience new things, when you step out of your comfort zone, when you're embracing uncertainty. Basically, you have such powerful shifting moments where you no longer can see the world the same way and you can't operate the same way. It's a point of no return. And that's what allows you to go to the next level, because most people are operating with very limiting worldviews, very limiting belief systems, and they're stuck in their emotional state. What's really interesting, when you actually study psychology and when you study personality theory, is there's a concept in psychology called openness to new experience. It's one of the big 5 of the personality traits. And what all the research shows is that as people get older, they become increasingly less open to new experiences. They become less open to studying information that goes against their current worldview. They become less open to surrounding themselves with new people. They become less open to going to new places, to trying new things, to failing. Over time, people become less open to trying new things. They don't have that same childhood curiosity to try things. They're so emotionally attached to their identity, to their past, to who they think they are, to how they think the world works, to the emotions and the memories and the predictability and the certainty. They want certainty. They want predictability. They want emotional stability. And so they aren't open to new experiences. And this is what Jim Rohn said. He said, "Here is my best advice. Welcome all experiences. You never know which one is going to turn everything on. Don't put the walls up. The same walls that keep out disappointment keep out happiness. Take down the walls, go for the experience, let it teach you." So if you're not actually seeking new experiences where you don't exactly know how things are going to turn out, things that are outside your realm, where you're experiencing prediction errors, where you're experiencing new emotions that are outside your comfort zone, then you're not learning, you're not changing. And again, if you think back to those quotes I shared earlier, the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. The price of change is embracing an uncertainty. The price of change is doing things you haven't done by getting out of your past and by moving into the future. And when you start to embrace this as a way of life, then every 6-12 months, you actually will be embarrassed by who you were because you've done so much. And so look at your last 6 months, look at your last 12 months, look at your last 5 years. How much are you repeating the past? How much is today a reflection of yesterday? How much is last week a reflection of last month and last year? Like, are you still engaging in the same conversations, the same annoyances, the same frustrations? Have you resolved the problems that you're continually repeating over and over and over again? Most people, they're having a lot of experience. They're experiencing 24 hours each day, but they're not actually learning anything new. They're just having experience. So here's what's really interesting about people that get stuck in the past. When the first astronauts came back from the moon, this was back in the 70s, I think, or even 60s. You can get stuck in the past even after having a brilliant experience. What happened was the first astronauts that went to the moon, when they first came back, they immediately went crazy. They got extremely depressed. They didn't, the scientists and people around them were so confused. But think about it. What do you do after you go to the moon? What could you top? How could you top that? Even if you think about kids who become Olympians when they're super young, often they live in the past. They can never trump what they did before. And what Dan Sullivan says is you always need to make your future bigger than your past. So anyways, after these first sets of astronauts went crazy, what scientists and people at NASA and all sorts of things, they realized once the next set of astronauts went up to space and they came back, they needed to immediately be pursuing a new goal. They had to let go of the fact that they had gone to the moon. They had to engage their mind in a new task. And that's what's essential. Whether you've succeeded big or failed big in the past, you need to constantly be pursuing a newer and a bigger future, and you have to let go of that past. And this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Condoleezza Rice. She said, "I firmly believe you should never spend your time being the former anything." So whether you went to the moon, as for myself, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of this training, for the last 3 years, I've been the quote unquote #1 writer in the world on medium.com. That is not who I am anymore. Whether the statistics are correct, that's not who I want to be. If I was to attach to that past, I would go crazy, just like the astronauts who went to the moon. You have to live a better and a bigger future. And so the only way to embrace uncertainty, the only way to move forward is you have to be willing to let go of your old identity in order to step into something new. And you have to continually be pursuing a bigger and better future. Otherwise, you're stuck living in your past. And if you're stuck living in your past, then you're living out your past. And therefore, your life is certain, it's predictable, it's stable. And therefore, you're not continuously learning. And therefore, you can't be happy. So there's a really cool story about Joshua Waitzkin. Joshua Waitzkin, he wrote a really important book called The Art of Learning. And this is another way of not getting stuck. So the astronauts was basically an example of when you have a powerful positive experience. You go to the moon and then you get stuck in the past and you go crazy. Well, this is basically an example of a negative experience. So Joshua Waitzkin, he was a former chess prodigy. He's a world-class Tai Chi, world-class, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This guy is a learning master. And he does a lot of experimental learning techniques. And one of them is that he does underwater learning techniques to expand his breathing and stuff. And he goes into really cold water, like ice water. He follows some of the Wim Hof methods. And he was doing some underwater breathing techniques and he ended up blacking out. And he blacked out underwater, was underwater for several minutes. He had a near-death experience, almost died. And basically it was a heavily traumatic experience. And in his own words, that experience could have been something that plagued him for the rest of his life. And if you think back on some of your experiences, it's really interesting to think about. I talk to a lot of my friends and family from high school and stuff, and it's really interesting the experiences that they talk about when they talk about why they are the way they are, or why they're stuck. It's often experiences that happened to them 10, 15 years ago. And there's a concept called a refractory period. And basically what a refractory period is when you have an emotional experience or a traumatic experience or a hard experience, you have an emotional reaction. And the amount of time that you spend stuck in that reaction determines, where you are in your life. So if your refractory period is, 5 minutes, then that means that you could quickly, immediately respond. And that's what high performers do. So when Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan miss a shot, they don't over obsess about it. But a lot of times people have a negative experience when they're young and they live in that emotional experience for years and it ends up shaping their personality. It becomes a core memory and it gets in it. And that's what Josh Waitzkin did not want to happen. So ultimately what he did was he got back in the water 2 days later. Rather than having this become a post-traumatic stress, he decided to turn it into post-traumatic strength. He knew that if he didn't get it back in the water immediately, that he potentially might never go back in. And so he almost died and he went back, and 2 days later he was trying the same techniques. And he was able to deal with that emotional uncertainty. He was able to actually resolve the emotions, and it didn't end up becoming a trauma that would go on to wreck him. And so when you have a huge failure, and by the way, this year I had one of the biggest failures of my life, just to be fully transparent. I wanted my book, Willpower Doesn't Work, to be a New York Times bestseller, and it didn't become that. And I invested almost everything, emotionally and financially, into that goal, and it didn't happen. And it kind of wrecked me, and I would say that the refractory period on that one for me was a few months because of how much I invested. It wasn't just the goal, it was how much I put into the goal. It was years of trying, and I was like inches from where I wanted to go, and it didn't happen. And, I was embarrassed by how much help I had gotten and by how much I had put in. that I went to a pretty deep cycle of depression for a few months earlier this year. And it wasn't until I immediately started to pursue newer and bigger goals that I got out of the past and decided to reframe what I'm trying to do and who I'm trying to be and pursuing a future that's bigger than my past. And so a question for you is, are you still living in one of these emotional experiences? Thinking back to the quote from Condoleezza Rice, are you still living from this old identity that you've had from the past? Never be the former anything. If you're not willing to reinvent yourself, then you're stuck. And Johann Harari, well, actually, no, it's not him. It's the author of *Sapiens*. He did this huge study on where the future is going. And he said that in the future, it's not just about reinventing ideas and reinventing products and reinventing companies. It's about being able to reinvent yourself, because the world is changing so fast. People in the past, they were able to have the same job, the same role, the same identity for 30 years, and then they retired. Now everything's changing so fast that if you're not adaptive, if you're not willing to change and reinvent and move towards new futures and learn new things, then you're screwed. Because learning is the ultimate superpower right now. You need to become good at learning and letting go. Basically, there's a really good book called The Body Keeps the Score. And what it means is that when you have a traumatic experience, such that Josh Waitzkin had, if you don't resolve it fast, it freezes your personality literally. Traumatic memories are different from normal memories. Traumatic memories don't connect to new experiences. They get stuck and disconnected. And so basically you get stuck in the past and you can't take in new experiences. When you don't have traumatic memories, when your memory is healthy, it's fluid. It's always changing based on new experience coming in. You're always absorbing new experiences, and those experiences change your memory. Thus, they change your personality. But most people, they have a semi-frozen personality because they're stuck in emotional experiences from their past. They're stuck in a past identity. They're stuck living, trying to experience certainty and predictability and stability. And that allows, basically what they have is a frozen personality. So the book, The Body Keeps the Score, is probably the best book written to this time on trauma. So at this point, where the science and psychology is going is it's showing that our behavior is what shapes our identity and our personality. There's a concept called self-signaling. And there's a really good quote. It basically says that actions provide a signal to ourselves. That is, actions are self-signaling. What it means is that every behavior you perform signals back to you the type of person you are. If you're playing it safe, then you're telling yourself, I'm playing it safe. How James Clear would say it is every behavior casts a vote to the type of person you think you are. So every time you do something, you're casting a vote for that. If you go to the gym, you're casting a vote that says, I'm the type of person that goes to the gym. If you wake up early, you're signaling to yourself, I'm the type of person that wakes up early. And so in this way, your behaviors reshape your identity. They reshape your personality. So it's not necessarily your personality that creates your behavior. It's your behaviors and your experiences that create your personality. And for most people, what they do is they get stuck in behavioral cycles and they get stuck living in the experiences of the past. Well, once you become intentional about who you are, you can start performing behaviors that are intentional and thoughtful. And you can start creating transformational experiences that expand your mind. And so you can proactively shape your identity and your personality. So new behaviors create new emotions. And new emotions shift your biology, because when you step into new emotions, they shock your emotional system. And your physical body then has to readjust. And what your body is going to do is it's going to try to seek, homeostasis. When you start doing something that's new, when you start stepping into uncertainty, when you start seeking new experiences, your body is going to want, you're going to want to go back to that comfort zone, that comfortable place. And that's why you need a system. That's why you need a system, a community to actually help you keep going forward, or else you're going to quickly revert back. And that's what most people do. Most people are stuck in the past, and they avoid the emotions that are the doorway to their freedom. They avoid uncertainty. They engage in behaviors that are predictable, and their behavior supports who they are, not who they want to be. So this is one of the reasons why approaching goals from a really long-term perspective, like a New Year's resolution, is bad, is because most people, they don't necessarily have a system that's put in place that moves them forward. They don't have a system that helps them to deal with the emotional baggage of change. They first start trying new things like going to the gym or eating healthy. And in the moment, in the beginning, it feels pretty exciting, but pretty quickly their body is reverting back. They're wanting the certainty of the emotions that they experience by the behaviors that they've been doing for years. And so by February or by March, they're quickly reverted back to the person they were. They've got the same environments that trigger the behaviors that they want. They get these, cues in their environment. They get these temptations, and all of a sudden they find themselves eating the cookies again, or drinking the alcohol, or whatever it is, living on their cell phone, gazing through social media. Their environment is set up so that it keeps them stuck. So they perform the same behaviors, they experience the same emotions, and they have no system for change. So what is a better system? And this is where I'm going to start to share with you kind of some strategic ways that you can actually apply this stuff so that you're moving forward. Rather than trying something for rather than trying to pursue growth for 52 weeks, it's a lot better to do sprints. Rather than running a marathon, you sprint and then you recover. So if you were to pursue some huge goals for 90 days that are focused purely on your core priorities, after those 90 days, after that sprint, you try something that's huge. It's more experimental. And you have more willingness to fail. It's more imaginative. Then you rest and you recover. So you sprint. And it's more of a gamified approach where you're sprinting towards something where you could fail. You're sprinting towards something that may not work. You're embracing uncertainty. And then after those 90 days, you stop. You rest and you recover. You take a break. So Tim Ferriss talks a lot about mini retirements, and there's lots of research that talks about sabbaticals and just taking a break, stopping, and giving yourself time to digest what just happened. And this is how all high performers work. They go through phases where they're in a deep learning phase where they're pushing their boundaries, and then they stop and they rest, they recover, they think about it, and they assess what happened. And what you do is during this recovery and during this reflection period, you're focused on the gains, not the gap. You look back on the previous 90 days and you say, what happened? What did I learn? And if you were pushing your boundaries, then you probably actually experienced a lot. You had a lot of prediction errors. You experienced a lot of unpredictability. You learned a lot. You adjust a lot because you were pursuing something bigger and harder, and you were embracing new things. And so what you do is you focus on the gains. You focus on all the things that you learned, and it's really interesting. But when you start focusing on the gains, you start to realize how much you grew. And when you focus on how much you learned and how much you grew, that actually gives you confidence, because your confidence is a product of your prior behavior. And so when you look back on the past and you recognize and appreciate what happened and all that you learned, it gives you confidence to pursue bigger and better things, which you'll do during the next 90 days, where you sprint and you're kind of pushing your boundaries. And this is a different system than just trying to pursue goals for 52 weeks. It's actually pursuing goals for 90 days in a sprint fashion, where you're you first have to get clear on the priorities and the design, but then you sprint and you rest and recover, and then you focus on the gains, and then you redesign and you focus on it again. And just like the astronauts, whether you were successful during those 90 days or whether you failed big, you have to let go of what happened. You can't then operate from the past. Every 90 days is a time to reset, to let go, and to try again. Don't be the astronaut, be the Josh Waitzkin, where even if you went through a lot of growth, it might be slightly traumatic, because growth is often emotional, it's challenging. And so whatever happened during those 90 days, if you were pushing yourself, if you were sprinting, and then you recover and you allow yourself to reset and digest, you have to let go of what happened, and then you redesign a fresh future, and then you sprint from the future. So you don't become, just as Condoleezza Rice said, never be the former anything. Even after your 90-day sprint, you let it go, and you don't let that define you. You learn from it, you digest it, and then you create a fresh future. This is how you can make life more of a game than a grind. You gamify life. You turn into challenges, turn into obstacles, turn into competitions, and you're sprinting. You're having more fun. You're trying things that are new. And obviously, the best way to do this is to have a community. And I call these 3-month energy cycles. So 90-day challenges, 90-day sprints. These are energy cycles, because when you're trying something new, the brain loves novelty. And so when you're trying something new, it gives you energy. Plus, you're sprinting and then you're recovering. And this is the growth process. So Josh Waitzkin again, he said, I think of the learning process as an undulation of deep learning and then periods of surfacing and reflection. That's what I'm talking about right here, where you basically sprint for a long period of time, enough time to reshape your habits, to reshape your, to make substantial progress towards big goals. And then you surface and you give yourself, let's just say, a week where you don't do anything, where, I mean, obviously you maintain, let's just say if you have a job, but you give yourself huge breaks. You give yourself lots of time to recover. Hopefully you give yourself, maybe you get out of your routine environment, go for a drive, maybe you go for a flight, like get out and actually just rest and give yourself lots of time to reflect and think about what happened. So yeah, the reason why this works, so there's a psychologist at Stanford, his name's BJ Fogg, and he's one of the best psychologists on behavior change. He says that design beats willpower. What I'm describing to you is a system or a design towards life that eliminates willpower. Because when you're on these 90-day challenges, when you're in more of a competitive gamified mode where you're sprinting towards big things, and obviously you have a big why, and I'm going to show you other strategies to compel you forward, then life becomes more fun. There's two types of motivation in psychology. There's push and there's pull. Push motivation is where you have to literally push yourself to do something, and pull motivation is where you're pulled forward by a quest, or you're pulled forward by a situation or a community or a group, or pulled forward by your imagination of what's possible. And so you can design for pull motivation. You can design and have a system in place where you're being pulled forward rather than having to just grind out day after day, pushing yourself to make change. You can set stuff up so that the system pulls you forward. Again, if you're not embarrassed by who you were a year ago, you're probably not learning enough. I'm talking about making massive change every 90 days, where 90 days from now, you've made some pretty fundamental changes. You've learned huge things. This is actually how you slow time down. So for most people, their time is moving extremely fast. It's because they're not moving towards a desired destination. I actually wrote an entire ebook about this called Slipstream Time Hacking. But the idea is that from a cosmological perspective, time is not about minutes, it's about distance. If you think about a light year is not about how long it takes, it's about how far it goes. Like the sun is 8 light minutes away. Basically, time is a representation of how fast something is going through space. And if you speed something up through space, you slow time down. And so if you can speed up how fast you get to your goals, you actually literally slow time down. And so if you're making enormous progress towards your goals every 90 days, then you've lived more in 90 days than you potentially lived in the last 10 years. If you can make more progress towards your dreams in 90 days than you did in the last 10 years, then you actually experienced more life in 90 days. And so this is why if you're not embarrassed by who you were last year, then you're not learning. You're not experiencing enough life. And the cool part about learning is that we don't necessarily have a cap on our capacity to learn and change. It's based on the experiences we have. It's based on how much we're willing to experience prediction errors and emotional challenge. And then like weight skin, embracing the difficulty of emotion rather than avoiding the pain of it, and not getting stuck when you win or fail. So this is why Peter Thiel, the billionaire, someone who started several companies, someone who's constantly being willing to take on new things that he's never done before, can ask the question, how do you achieve your 10-year plan in the next 6 months? It's about a fundamentally different approach to life. It's not about doing the same thing over and over. It's about shifting how you do things. It's about embracing learning. It's about embracing new experiences. It's about embracing new people and collaborating and doing things differently than you've done in the past. If you're willing to do things differently and shift your approach, you could probably achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months. It's about how you're doing it. Again, time is a measure of distance. And if you can get there faster, what if you could create a wormhole? Like if you've ever seen the movie Interstellar, what if you were able to fold time? What if you were to find a different approach that could get you to that same destination quicker? It may be a relationship. It may be a behavior, a new pattern. Either way, it's going to be an emotional experience. It's going to be hard because it's going to be unpredictable. It's going to be unstable, And if you've actually seen Interstellar, when they go through the wormhole, it's very unstable. But how much space did they just cross going through that wormhole? And a wormhole could be a bold behavior. It could be engaging in a new environment. But are you willing to take a risk? Are you willing to actually try something that will fail, that might fail? Are you willing to do something that's not reflective of the person you think you are? Are you willing to try something new that's totally outside your bounds? Again, there's so much research that shows that people are not open to new experiences that limits them over time. They just start living in an increasingly small bubble. And so, of course, they're not achieving big goals. Of course, they don't have an enormous belief in themselves. So basically, taking this whole thing apart, I've learned and adapted a process that allows you to make huge progress every 90 days during these 3-month energy cycles. It's a very simple 4-step process. I've emailed you about it. I talked about it in the ads. There's a 4-step process that I have learned. So there's a guy named Jason Corman. He's one of the best culture design people in the world. He owns a company called Gaping Void. A lot of the art actually in this presentation is from Gaping Void. Me and Jason are good friends, and he taught me a process that they use to design people's behavior when it comes to culture design, shifting and shaping organizational cultures. And I took what they learned and I adapted it. And basically, it's a 4-step process. This is what they use to some extent. Mine's a slightly different version. But this is what I use in these 3-month energy cycles. And it's how every 3 months you can make enormous progress. So you start with assessing and diagnosing where you're currently at. If you don't know where you are, if you can't measure it, you can't master it, you can't change it. And so you have to get really clear on where you currently are at. When you step into a new environment, you want to assess and diagnose the situation. If you aren't willing to get clear on where you're at and what's not working, then you're living in denial. You're living in delusion. Then you design and plan. Once you know where you're at and you can get the data on what's really happening in your world, then you design and plan. What do you really want? What needs to change? Then you activate and apply. Once you've made a decision and you've made plans, then you start to immediately activate the new behaviors, the new systems. You start to actually put that plan in action. That's the difference between being in motion and being in action. A lot of people are in motion, which means that they're doing stuff that's not really pulling them forward. Being in action means that you're actually executing the behaviors that will make the change happen. And I'm going to break down all 4 of these. The last one is that you need to reinforce, recover, and then repeat. One of the main reasons why people don't stick with their New Year's resolutions is because they don't reinforce it through environment, through community, through challenge, through gamification. They're not sprinting. They're kind of pulling themselves forward, but ultimately their environment, their emotions, their desire for stability pulls them right back. So they're not reinforcing themselves. So I'm going to break down all 4 of these. Step 1, assess and diagnose. This is from Stephen Covey. He said, most people spend their whole lives climbing the ladder of success, only to realize when they get to the top that the ladder has been leaning against the wrong wall. So a big part of assessing and diagnosing your life, assessing and diagnosing your current behaviors, your objectives, your goals, your relationships, everything about your life and your behavior is asking yourself, why am I pursuing this? Am I pursuing someone else's goals? Am I climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall? That's the type of assessment I'm talking about, where you're truly honest and authentic about if you're doing the wrong thing. Because if, Ariana Huffington said the best way to finish a project is to stop it, is to quit. And often you have to realize it's better to jump off a ship that's heading the wrong direction. But most people are not even willing to be honest with themselves about the things that are going on in their life. And so they may continue to climb up the wrong wall because they're not willing to take a moment and assess and say, what's going on here? So the purpose of assessing and diagnosing is to clarify and then to determine your core priorities. And one of the best ways to do this is the 80-20 rule. 80% of your outcomes and your results come from just a few of the things you do, from 20% of what you're doing. And it's actually more like 90-10. And here's something, just to be completely honest with you, the more successful you become, or the more you start making rapid progress towards your goals, the more fuzzy this gets. I have to be honest with you. Over the last year, I've spent a lot of time in masterminds, and I've spent a lot of time collaborating. I've spent a lot of time doing podcasts and things that have been helpful towards my growth as a writer, but at the same time, I've focused a lot of my energy on the 80% of behaviors that are only getting 20% of my results. And so a big part of assessing and diagnosing is looking at all of the things that you're doing. You're doing 150 things every day. You're looking at social media, you're working on this, you're working on that. What of these things is actually producing results? What are the few things which matter most? What are the few things in your life that are actually moving the dial? What are the few things that you would die for? And so I myself have had to really scale back what I'm doing. I've had to design an environment, a system, after a lot of honesty about assessing and looking at my results the last 3 months, 6 months, and saying, okay, I haven't made as much progress as I want. Why? Well, it's been because I've been focusing on the 80% of things that are only driving a few, a small percentage of my results. And so that's part of the assessing is deleting. It's deleting the things that aren't actually making progress, deleting the people, the places, the behaviors, and just being honest. It's like, this thing is not moving the boat forward. And then it's focusing on those few things that really matter. Probably your key relationships, could be your faith, could be the few things that you rock at, and then learning how to either delete or delegate other things. So most people really get uncomfortable when it comes to assessing their life. I really love this quote from Mahatma Gandhi. He said, happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. So most people, they won't do a true analysis. And so what they want in their head or what they believe they should do, they don't do. Most people, they want to do a lot of things, but what they think and what they say and what they do are not in harmony. They're not acting according to their biggest goals. They're not acting according to their values and beliefs. They're letting things in the outside world govern them, even though emotionally and mentally they're against it. And so if you're going to do this assessment every 30 days where you're looking at your life, where you're doing an 80-20 analysis, where you're actually looking at your behavior and asking yourself, are you acting towards your biggest goals? The only way to be happy is when what you say, what you think, and what you do are in harmony. So James Clear, and the only reason I bring him up is I just recently read his book, but on his website, he does a life audit every 12 months where he assesses, what he accomplishes. I would argue you should do this every 3 months, especially when you're going in from more of a sprint cycle. You sprint towards a really audacious goal that requires a lot of uncertainty, a lot of prediction errors, where you need stability and support from, let's just say, a community or from accountability partners, where you need where you're basically, you have a system. Where you're actually seeking huge growth, you need a support system around you. You need a system that allows you to stay in momentum and to deal with the emotional pain. Then every 3 months, because you've taken such action, you look back, and that's where you do your audit and you do the 80-20 and you reassess your priorities and you measure the gain, not the gap. And then you let go. Again, you don't get stuck there, and then you start with a fresh slate every 3 months. And if you do this every 3 months for 12 months, I'm promising you, you can make insane distance in a single year. Not only that, but you don't experience the drop in motivation that most people experience when they set New Year's resolutions, because you're sprinting towards a finish line that's 3 months out, and then you're starting a new one and sprinting towards the finish line. So you're always somewhere in one of these 3-month cycles, and you're always sprinting towards this bigger, better future. And then you go through this huge analysis phase where you're just assessing, you're learning, you're reflecting on what happened. So if you're getting slightly uncomfortable with this step, my challenge for you is to go through it. Like, actually do one of these things. Jim Rohn said, if you're not getting the results you want, make a better plan and get a better result. So do a life assessment. If you're up for that, type a yes in the checkbox. And if you actually do this, type a yes in the checkbox as well. So when it comes to what you should assess and analyze, Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, said, if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. So the idea is you need to really clarify those few things which truly matter. That's the 80-20. What are the few things that really matter that move the dial? And you have to be open to saying no, and not necessarily being Mr. Nice Guy or Mrs. Nice Guy. You got to say no and delete the things that are not your core priorities. If you're not living your true values, you can't be happy. So those are the things you need to track and assess every 3 months. You need to give yourself enough physical, emotional, and mental space. And this is something you can actually even do every morning. And a big key in doing this is actually, obviously every 90 days, you want to have one of these, clarity and visualization sessions, where maybe you take a few days off, where you just totally recover, maybe you take a mini retirement or a small sabbatical. But every single morning, you should give yourself enough space so that you're getting clarity every single day. Again, 80+% of people, the first thing they do when they wake up is immediately grab their iPhone, and then they go into subconscious mode where they begin scrolling social media. Most people, when they get on social media, it's not intentional. Think about it. When you jump on social media, you have no clue what you're going to get. You literally don't know what you're going to scroll to. You're putting yourself in a reactive and subconscious state, and that's what most people do every day. And so they put themselves through this predictable cycle where they're living out the same emotions, they're doing the same thing, their life's a repeat of what they're doing yesterday. They're not purposefully getting clear and then acting from their future. They're actually literally living from their past. And so a part of this analysis session is that every morning you actually give yourself space where you get clear again on what you want. Every 90 days you set these huge targets. Every morning you give yourself space and you rewrite those goals. If you wrote your goals down every single day and you gave yourself space to strategize and think, what do I do today that would move the needle the most? Darren Hardy, the author of The Compound Effect, says you don't have to be courageous all the time. You only have to be courageous a few moments of every day. But if during your morning routine, you gave yourself space to write down your goals, to visualize them mentally and emotionally, and then to strategize, what do I need to do today or this week to move the dial the most? What would take courage? What would take stepping out of my comfort zone? And you give yourself time in the morning when your brain is most primed and when your subconscious has been operating at peak levels, because when you sleep, your subconscious mind is so genius. People don't take advantage of what their mind and their brain can offer them. If you give yourself recovery time in the evening and in the morning, you will get the most powerful creative solutions to your problems, especially if you're pursuing huge goals. And so you need space and time. And ultimately, you want to step outside of your routine environment. In Willpower Doesn't Work, I talk about how in my morning routine, I step out of my house. I wake up, step out of my house. You can even just go out to your car. You can just go somewhere down the road. But by immediately stepping out of your environment, you leave all the cues, all the triggers, all the emotions, all the thoughts of that environment, and you step into a fresh space, which immediately shifts your energy. And and ultimately, you want to create a sacred space, a simple environment where it triggers you getting into a peak state. I recently did a contest for Willpower Doesn't Work where we gave away a Tesla. It was actually Joe Polish's Tesla, who owns Genius Network. And the biggest thing that people got out of that competition was is having a sacred space. Some people, they literally designated a room where they went, and in the first thing in the morning, they would go journal, and that's where they got their ahas. And that's where they were able to shift some of their patterns, because they gave themselves space to remind themselves first thing in the morning, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And they envisioned that. And then they operated and acted from that future rather than playing out the past like they did the day before. Now, when it comes to, every 3 months, after you've gone through a 90-day sprint, you want to give yourself like 3 to 7 days where you completely break from your goals, where you actually maybe engage in a lot more play. And, maybe you take a break, maybe you go on a trip. Do things that are totally maybe just let go of your diet for that week and just totally recover and allow yourself. Interestingly, your habits will have probably changed, as will your desires. And so you might not even have interest in doing what you did before, but you want to give yourself space. And it's during that space that you reflect, you analyze, you redo the 80-20, and then that's where you start to give yourself time to think about it. So Demusa, a person in my AMP program, she's applied these principles. And these are what have allowed her to become who she wants to be. She said, before this course, I lacked self-confidence. I lacked self-discipline. I had an inferior self-image. I was busy but not seeing any results. I had wishes and intentions but no action. I had dreams and visions but no plans. Day by day, I'm taking action steps towards who I want to become. My dreams and visions have been ignited in plans and actions to truly realize my definite chief aim. This is what can happen to you when you actually start designing your life, when you start getting clear, when you start actually giving yourself the space to be real, the space to be honest about what you really want rather than what maybe someone else has wanted, where you stop climbing the wrong ladder. And what's really interesting is that even people who are super successful, perceived to be successful, they maybe have all the nice cars and stuff, a lot of these people are the most unhappy people because they really are climbing the wrong ladder. And so that's why you need to regularly assess where you're at. And in order to do this, you have to optimize your life for recovery. So without recovery, you can't have clarity. Without recovery, you can't get creative ideas. Like a lot of the research says that most creative ideas happen when you're not at work, but when you're actually like resting and recovering, when you're in unique environments. If you're not giving yourself time and space, then you're not clear. And you can't do deep work. So deep work, which is what Cal Newport writes about, is this idea of being in a deep state of flow and focus. and you can't actually have deep work. You can't get into flow. You can't be deeply engaged in what you're doing if you don't recover and you don't reset and you don't unplug. And that requires unplugging every day, but also it requires unplugging every few months and giving yourself a serious break. And so this is where the research comes in. And this is what I've been studying, So in organizational psychology, there's a concept called psychological detachment from work. And basically what it means is that if you don't psychologically detach every single day, where you unplug your thoughts, your emotions, your brain, your body from your work and just disengage, then you're going to have a really hard time fully engaging in work, but you're also having a hard time fully engaging in life. You're always semi-in, semi-out of consciousness. And basically this is what the research found. People who don't recover from work, actually this is for people who do recover from work, so this is for people who do psychologically detach. They experience less work-related fatigue, less procrastination. They have more engagement at work. They've got more vigor, more zest, more flow. So if you allow yourself to recover, if you put your, actually unplug, and I would say unplug the technology too, which I'll show you in a second, you'll have greater work-life balance. You'll have greater marital satisfaction, greater mental health. Here's the thing. Despite the fact that I'm trying to finish my PhD and I've got 3 going on 5 kids, a lot of people wonder how I've been able to quote unquote write so much, be so prolific. I don't actually spend that much time writing. And the reason I don't need to spend that much time writing is because I'm fully recovered when I do write, because I'm deeply engaged in the other areas of my life. And because I'm recovered and because I'm in alignment, when I need to sit down and write, it's powerful. And so the idea is that you don't need more of the thing. You actually need to be a better human being. You need to be more aligned with yourself. You need to be more clear so that when you do operate, when you do execute, it's deep work. It's deep, successful work. And that's really what's successful in the world today is work that's effective, work that's focused on results. You have to let go of the old industrial model. And basically what that is where you pat yourself on the back based on how much time and effort you put in. That's kind of the employee mindset where you reward yourself based on how much time you clocked in. We now live in what's called the results economy. And in order to get the best results, you need to operate at the most peak levels. In order to operate at the most peak levels, you need to have this level of recovery and rest, and where you give yourself the space to get clear on what you want and where you're in alignment with yourself. And then when you do work, you're deeply engaged and focused. And then when you aren't working, you're completely off. Dan Sullivan said, wherever you are, that's where you should be. So not only do you want to recover from work, but you need to recover from tech. Like, when was the last time, honestly, that you recovered from tech? When was the last time you put your phone on airplane mode and just left it away from your body for a week? Here are basically some of the outcomes of unhealthy smartphone use. More stress, more depression, more anxiety. Daytime dysfunction is basically where you're operating at a weird level, where you do weird behaviors. Like, you're driving down the road and you accidentally go through a red light because, you were staring at your phone. Decreased sleep quality. Again, some of the best and most important recovery is sleep. And people get way worse sleep than they think they do because they're not recovering from tech. They're not recovering from work. They haven't created an environment where they can get clear. Therefore, their subconscious mind is replaying the past. Decreased psychological and emotional well-being because of cell phone use. Decreased emotional intelligence, decreased academic performance. Once they found that negative smartphone and laptop use, once they found just basically the negative effects of these things 1 to 2 hours before sleep. And so the idea is, can you unplug from these addictions and allow yourself to rest? If you're not, then I guarantee you're not as clear as you think you are. And if you're absorbed in your work and absorbed in your tech, then you're probably climbing up the wrong ladder. You're not doing enough 80-20 analyses. You're not giving yourself clarity in the morning to not only write your future goals, but then to operate from those goals. First thing in the morning, you're probably sucked back into the smartphone addiction, which then allows you to live a very predictable, very certain, very emotionally safe life. So this is a very different approach to life, about recovery, about clarity, than about action towards big goals. In my opinion, the new currency of today is time not staring at a screen. And obviously, we're all staring at a screen right now because we're watching this. But do you give yourself more time away where you're recovering, where you're resting, where you're assessing where you're currently at, where you're doing things like 80-20 analyses, where you're actually determining the direction of your life? Creativity happens while you're recovering. And you can't perform at your best without recovery. You can't do deep work without deep recovery, without psychological detachment from work, without breaking away. You can't break in. You can't do the deep work as much. And even if you're busy, super busy with life, if you give yourself space, you're going to be able to perform at a very high, deep level when you engage, especially if you optimize your life and environment for it. You can't have clarity without regular recovery. So every 3 months, I want you to give yourself a huge break. Measure the gain, not the gap. Assess honestly where you're at. And then you need to let go of what happened. And then this is where redesign happens for the next sprint. So again, every 3 months, you go through this system. You go through this intense learning process, and then you surface, you recover, you assess, you analyze, and you'll make huge progress if every day you allow evening and morning recovery and design. But now that takes us to stage 2, which is design. Every 3 months, you want to design bigger and better goals. One of my favorite quotes comes from Albert Einstein. He said, imagination is more important than knowledge, for knowledge is limited, whereas imagination embraces the entire world, stimulating progress, giving birth to evolution. So when it comes to designing your future, how imaginative are you? Or how limited are you? Are you limiting your thinking because you're afraid to step into some big future? Again, Kobe Bryant became who he was because of curiosity and imagination. So here are some startling facts. Very few Americans actually plan and invest in their future. Like savings and investments have declined substantially over the last 40 years. Millennials are terrified of the stock market. Basically, what we're seeing is people are living day to day. Very few people are truly living towards their ideal future. Most people's financial life is a mess. Even in America, where there's so much opportunity, people are afraid to actually live through their future. They're more likely to live from their fears of the past, their worries for the present moment, the complexities of a changing world. And so very few people know how to truly design and invest and create a powerful future. But the truth is if you start living with imagination and curiosity, like Kobe, where you feel protected and you're willing to embrace uncertainty, you're willing to try new things, you're willing to actually visualize and mentally and emotionally create a powerful future, you can start making huge progress. And the cool part is you can start doing it in 90-day sprints. You can make huge progress in 90 days. You can imagine something big, something creative, something bold. One of the things that Tim Ferriss does is he pursues 90-day experiments rather than pursuing goals. Because experiments, you feel more likely to fail. If you fail an experiment, that's called learning, right? That's what science is all about. So what if you did a 90-day experiment where you were extremely imaginative about what was possible? What if you pursued something that would take a lot of emotional, that would shock your emotional system, that would require you to step way out of your comfort zone, where you would slow time down a lot because of the progress you could make? A lot of it's your strategy. Your strategy may be far too conservative. So there's a really cool story, and I recently wrote about this on Medium, about Ezra Benson. He was a farmer out in Idaho, but when he was 16 years old, he got hired to basically do a bunch of farming work. And first thing in the morning, he had a question that popped in his mind. And his question was, how much could I do today? Like if I worked as hard as I could, how much could I do in one day? Another question that's similar is, how far could I go? And basically what he did is he worked super hard all day, and he was just absorbed by the curiosity of that thought. How much could I do? How much could I accomplish in one day? And by the time he looked back at the end of the day, and he was so absorbed in his goal, he realized he had done more than a full acre, which is an enormous amount. And the farmer who had hired him was shocked by all that he had done. And so, he made a lot more money. But that question is so interesting. How much could I do? And that's what I want you to think about when it comes to these 90-day sprints is, seriously, how much could you do in 90 days? How far could you go? It's the exact opposite of what most people think. Most people, they spend their days trying to do as little as possible. They go to work and they try to do as little as possible. But if you tried to figure out how far you could go, if you tried to figure out how much you could do, you would be shocked when you look back, even at one day, if you actually embraced it, if you actually moved forward, if it was designed and planned and you sprinted and you were curious about how much you could do versus how much you couldn't do. It's shocking when you look back and you get so absorbed in what you're doing that you don't even realize how far you've come. That's what happened to Ezra Benson, is he was just so busy working, he looked back and he was stunned by how far he came. That's where you measure the gain, not the gap. And if you actually live this way, where you're incredibly curious, not about how little you can do, but how much you can do, about how far you can go, this is where you start to separate yourself from the masses. Most of the people, your friends, your family, even your social circle, they don't live like this. They're not seeing how far they can go. They're living day to day. And if you start living every day or every 30 days or every 90 days, seeing how far you can go, you start to separate yourself from the masses. You start to design a life that's completely unrecognizable to yourself and other people. You start to look different. I'm telling you, it's amazing. And that's, I think, what your life is for. Your life, this is not about arrogance. This is not about ego. It's not about being better than other people. It's about literally you yourself as a human being seeing how far you can go. How far can you go? What can you become? That's actually a question that drives Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan's the founder of Strategic Coach. He's one of my mentors. And that's literally the question he has for himself, is how far can I go in my life? And then he just works. He's always creating a bigger future than his past. And my question is for you, if you were to live optimally, if you were to stop constraining yourself, if you were willing to actually be bold in your approach, if you were willing to be imaginative about what's possible and then incredibly bold, how far could you go in the next 90 days? How far could you go in your entire life? And every single day you could ask yourself, how much could I do? It's the exact opposite of what most people do. Most people's imaginations are so backwards. Joe Polish actually said that winners find ways to be winners and losers find ways to be losers. What's crazy is that people who are failing in life are incredibly imaginative about how bad they can fail. They put a lot of energy and effort into failing. So these are just some pictures. So when it comes to imagining and creating a vision, there's a really good quote. It's from Peter Senge. He wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. He's a very powerful, amazing professor at MIT. He studies systems theory, but he says it doesn't matter what your vision is, it matters what your vision does. So is your vision doing something to you? What does your behavior reflect about your current vision? So if your behavior isn't changing, if your environment isn't changing, if you're not constantly pushing your boundaries, then your vision isn't working. There's another quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, and he said, when the why is strong enough, you'll figure out how. Jim Rohn also said, the bigger the why, the easier the how. And so if your vision is compelling, if it's powerful, then you're going to be changing your behaviors. Again, the bigger the why, the easier the how. You'll be doing things that are scary. You'll be doing things that are bold. You'll be doing things that are new every single day. You'll be pitching yourself. You'll be trying new things. You'll be failing a lot. And so if you're not, then your vision isn't working. Just look at your current behavior. That's a reflection of, is your vision working? You need immediate action. You need to crave the results so bad that the work involved is irrelevant. So my question for you is, when was the last time you pushed your own boundaries? When was the last time you stepped into uncertainty? When was the last time you experienced a crazy prediction error or had a powerful transformational experience that reshaped your memory, reshaped your approach, reshaped your goals? Again, the quote from earlier that basically said, by Oliver Wendell Holmes, a mind stretched by a new experience can never go back. Like, when was the last time you had your mind so stretched that you couldn't go back to the old system of doing things? So when it comes to visualizing and creating goals, there's a concept called expectancy theory. This is actually one of the top theories in motivation in psychology. In my opinion, this is the most interesting theory in motivation about what it takes to be extremely motivated. This is what it requires. It requires three things. You must first believe that the reward of a particular goal is important, meaningful, and compelling. So if the reward isn't compelling, if the end in sight doesn't excite you, you're not going to be motivated. So not only do you need to believe that the reward is exciting, but you must believe that you can figure out how to get there. You have to know the how. You have to have clear strategies, plans, or people. And Dan Sullivan and others often say it's not about how, it's about who. But you can't be motivated if you don't actually have a plan to get there. And then you also must believe that you can execute that plan. Even if it's way above your current skill level, can you figure it out? That's basically the definition of confidence, is the ability to figure things out. And so if you don't have these three things, you can't be motivated. You must believe that the reward is exciting. You must believe that you can know how to get that reward, and you must believe that you can execute whatever's required to get there. You must be able to pay the price. If you don't have these three things, you're not going to be motivated. So when it comes to a vision that works, when it comes to imagination, you must believe that the result is so compelling and that you can figure out how to do it and that you can make it happen. So this is what Sarah Sai, a person in my course, said once she started figuring this stuff out, once she started to actually execute and be super imaginative. She said, I've always enjoyed writing and music and creative arts, but never gave myself permission and time to pursue these things. But with the motivation and encouragement of Ben and Rachel in the AMP community, in 2018 so far, I've written and recorded over 50 songs, written a musical with some of those songs, published over 200 articles on Medium and other sites, written over 60 short stories, and increased my income through my writing. The most important thing for me is that being a part of AMP has given me more hope, as well as evidence that I can accomplish more than I thought. And that's what I'm talking about slowing time. When you ask yourself with curiosity, how far can I go? This person wrote 200 articles. They wrote 50 songs. They wrote 60 short stories in less than a year. And that's probably more than they did in the last 5 or 10. The shocking part when you actually get control of your time and when you actually start executing and moving forward and you're recovered is that you can achieve so much. I'm telling you, I could write a book in less than 30 days and it would be an amazing book if I wanted to, because I'm recovered and because I apply these things. It's not about the amount of time you do it in. It's about having the clarity and the why, about doing something that really compels you, and about then having a system that drives you forward and then engaging in this learning process where you're going through deep stress, and that's pushing yourself, and then deep recovery where you're actually resting yourself. You can achieve so much in your life. You can achieve way more than you can even currently imagine. So now we're going to move to the next step. You've assessed, you've diagnosed, you've designed, you've planned. Now it's time to activate and apply. And I've already talked a little bit about the difference between motion versus action, but motion is those things like planning. So if you start planning or if you start assessing, those things are being in motion, but they're not action, and you need both. Planning won't get you results. And so as much as designing and planning work, they're not going to get you results. You have to act. You must be willing to fail. So when it comes to immediate and intense action, you have to be willing to be wrong. So this is Ken Robinson, and he's an amazing educational reformer and learner, but he said, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. And Seth Godin said, if you're not willing to do something that might not work, if you're willing to do something that might not work, you're closer to being an artist. So you need prediction errors. You need to embrace uncertainty. When it comes to massive action, you must be willing to fail. And so in psychology, there's two orientations toward goals. There's an approach orientation and a avoid orientation. Basically, are you avoiding failure or are you approaching victory? Most people are avoiding loss. And in order to actually approach something new, you have to be willing to give up what you were to become what you want to become. You have to approach a new and bigger future, a new and bigger identity, which involves embracing uncertainty. So, are you playing to win or are you playing not to lose? If you're playing not to lose, then you're trying to hold on to something. You're trying not to lose your prior identity, or you're trying not to lose your stability, or you're trying not to lose something. You have to be willing to lose the past in order to create the future. You have to be on offense. You've got to move forward and step into that future and embrace the uncertainty and trust. That's where expectancy theory comes in. You got to trust and believe that you can figure it out. You have to be approach oriented to advance in your life. You have to be on offense. And what this means is that you're going to fail a lot. You're going to have a lot of prediction errors. You're going to learn, you're going to fail a lot, but that's how you grow. One of my favorite concepts is that it's better to be prolific than perfect. And if you've read the book Fear and Art, there's a really good story. Basically, the story is that, there was a professor, and he split his class into two groups. One, and this was a pottery class. And in one group, so basically on this side, he split one group in half, and he said, you will be graded based on the amount of pots you make. If you make 50 pots, you get an A. If you make 40 pots, you get a B. If you make 30 pots, you get a C. Basically, the more pots you make, the better. And you have to put all your pots on a scale, so the more pots you make, you're judged on quantity. The other group, he said, you're judged based on how good of a pot you make. If you make a beautiful, perfect pot, you get an A. If your pot has blemishes, you've got to B. Basically, what he found is that the group at the end of the semester who made like 50 or more pots, their pots ultimately became of higher quality than the group that only made one, because this group, the one that was trying to be perfect, the group that was focused more on quality, they spent almost all their time theorizing and stressing about how to make the perfect pot. They were perfectionistic. Whereas the group that just banged stuff out, they learned through trial and error, and ultimately they got to the point very quickly where they could consistently produce high quality and beautiful pots, and a lot of their pots were beautiful. And if you study people like Beethoven and Picasso, these people produced an insane volume of work. But not everything that they made was a masterpiece. They were prolific. They were willing to fail. They threw a lot out there. And in the midst of all of their quantity, they learned how to develop quality. And that's what you have to think about when it comes to action. It's better to be prolific than perfect. And in order to do that, you have to become future-oriented, not past-oriented. And again, the quote, you've got to let go of who you were. I firmly believe you should never spend your time being the former anything. Dan Sullivan, always make your future bigger than your past. You do that by being approach-oriented, not avoid-oriented. You've got to approach a bigger future. You can't avoid loss. Avoiding loss is what keeps people stuck in situations that they don't love. They don't want to lose the certainty that they have. They don't want to deal with the emotional baggage of not knowing what's going to happen. This is one of my favorite quotes. Expect everything but attach to nothing. You focus on the results, but you don't attach to the outcomes. If you attach to the outcomes, that means you're living in the past. So you want to expect the best when you're pursuing a goal. Again, that's expectancy theory. You expect that amazing things will happen when you're pursuing these huge 90-day challenges or huge goals that might fail. You don't expect that they're going to fail. You expect that they're going to succeed. And you do everything you can to succeed. But the thing is you don't attach to the outcome. You let go of the outcomes fast. It's just like Michael Jordan and Kobe and all the best basketball players. If they miss, they let it go immediately. If you have a long refractory period where if you miss and you start getting upset and beating yourself up, then you can't recover quickly. You just have to let it go. You expect to make the shot, you expect to succeed, but regardless of the outcome, whether it's a win or a loss, you just let it go and you keep moving forward. Again, like the astronauts, if it's a win and you attach to the outcome, then you're stuck in some old identity. If it's a loss, then you're stuck in trauma. And so you expect big and amazing things to happen, and you just let go of the result. You assess, you learn from it, and then you just move on. You move forward. So this kind of reminds me of the quote, what you focus on expands. If you expect the worst to happen, you're going to attract the worst. If you expect the best, you're going to succeed a lot more. So this is what Steven said in my course. And this is what happened to him when he began to expect the best. He said, life is good. AMP is an amazing course and has allowed me to retrain my subconscious mind and my belief systems, forge productive habits, create an abundance and growth mindset, and create my own personal system for continued and sustained growth. This is my favorite part. He said, the course has taught me to tolerate greatness, learning, growth, achievement, and happiness, joy, gratitude, love, appreciation, and so much more. I have easily 10x my investment. What's so cool is that you actually do get in life what you're willing to tolerate. If you're willing to tolerate, bad relationships, that's what you have. Your life is a product of your standards. And once you get to the point where you tolerate only greatness, that's what happens. So another powerful and profound way, aside from just trying a lot and failing a lot, because again, this is the activate stage. Remember, you designed a dream. We've been talking about activate. One of the most powerful ways to activate a dream is by passing a point of no return. So one of the things that I studied in my PhD was the difference between wannabe entrepreneurs and actual entrepreneurs. And I talked a little bit about this. You might have even seen like a Facebook ad, but the power of investment. So in my research during my PhD, I asked all of these wannabe entrepreneurs and all these entrepreneurs, my big question is, what's the difference? How does someone go from a wannabe to a doer? How do you go from a dreamer to a doer? Not just someone who's a doer, but someone who's amazingly successful. And so I asked these two different populations of people, have you ever had a point of no return as it relates to being an entrepreneur? And almost all of the wannabes said no. A lot of them said, I anticipate one day having one. Like they're like, I'll have a point of no return when this happens. Meaning like I'll not go back. Whereas almost all of the actual entrepreneurs said, yes, I've had a point of no return. I've often had many. And a point of no return is basically the moment in which going forward is easier than going back. You can't withdraw. You're either so invested or so committed that you must go forward. And in studying a bunch of interviews, and I did my research similar to how Brene Brown did her, how she does her research. I did qualitative research where I interviewed people and then I looked for themes in their responses. And what I found is that the point of no return for most people was a financial investment. It was that time when they spent money on that website, or they invested in that shipment of shoes, or when they started investing money in their goal. That's when they started shifting their orientation. That's the point of no return. The biggest decision is when you start investing in what you want to do, and you stop investing in entertainment. You invest in education. That's what happened to me. That's what allowed me to become a professional writer. Is I started investing in education. I started investing in websites. I started investing in mentoring, and that became my point of no return. Not only was I invested, I was committed. So that's why there's this idea: nothing happens until after the ships are burned. Nothing happens until after you put yourself in a position where you must move forward. You put yourself in a position where you have to show up. What's really cool is that when you invest in yourself, you experience a psychological upgrade. So this is a quote from Dr. David Hawkins. He says, "The unconscious will allow us to have only what we believe we deserve. The more we hang on to our negativity and small self-image that results, the less we think we deserve. If we have a small view of ourselves, then we deserve poverty. And our unconscious will see to it that we have that actuality." So what happens when you invest in a goal, when you invest in a dream, when you invest in what you're doing, is you shatter your subconscious belief system. That behavior literally shatters what you think you deserve. When you invest in a goal, what you're saying is I deserve to achieve this goal. Therefore, your subconscious mind upgrades. You have this upgrade in psychology, and it shifts what you believe you can deserve, and therefore you're operating at this new level. Plus, you have this higher level of commitment because what you invest yourself in, you become committed to. And so that was one of the things I noticed in all of these things. That's how you shift from a dreamer to doer. Is you start shattering your subconscious blocks. You start upgrading your identity through investing in yourself, through investing in your dreams, through investing in your goals. And that's what I've figured out. I've invested big in myself and in my goals, and I believe that in a lot of ways that's what's allowed me to have pretty rapid success in my writing and in my work. So there's a really good example, and I've talked a lot about Dan Sullivan, but Dan Sullivan has coached more successful entrepreneurs than anyone in the world. And according to Dan, he wouldn't have had the confidence to charge $50,000 for one of his coaching programs if he hadn't first paid $100,000 to be in Joe Polish's 100K group. So Dan Sullivan, there's 3 stages in Strategic Coach, which is, again, one of the top I believe it's the #1 entrepreneurial coaching program in the world. But Dan, at the base level, you pay $10,000 to be in Strategic Coach a year. And then his 10X program is $25,000 a year. Well, Dan recently created a Game Changers program, which is $50,000 a year to be a part of. And he designed that course or that program in the last 2 years. And he said there's no way he would have had the confidence to charge $50,000 if he hadn't signed a check himself for $100,000. He joined Joe's 100K mastermind group, and by writing that check, it shattered his belief system. It upgraded his subconscious perspective, and he realized, holy crap, I can do bigger and better than this. So I want to make a point right now that it's obvious you don't need to invest $50,000 or $100,000 right now to have a psychological upgrade. Every investment has a 10x psychological return, and when you have that psychological return, it creates a financial return via massive action and commitment. And this is what happened to me. I mean, my first investments in my writing career were very small. $50, $100. Eventually, that even just buying a book for some people is such an investment in themselves. And so I'm just showing you, what happened to Dan. And obviously, when you invest in yourself, you can make a huge shift. This is Andreas in my course. She said, the course continues to be one of the best investments I've ever made in myself and my personal well-being. By 2017, my work and personal life were good by any measure, but felt somewhat stagnant. But now I'm in better shape and have a more calm and positive mindset. This course has shown me always to, again, move forward towards my goals with purpose. And that is one thing that I just really want you to think about is are you making investments in yourself? When was the last time you invested in a big dream? When was if you're a wannabe entrepreneur, when was the last time you actually put money towards your business? If you're an artist or an author, when was the last time you actually developed new skills? When was the last time you invested in yourself? So there's a really, really cool story of John Burke that I want to share with you, and it's how I believe he's become a creative genius. So that's John Burke in the pink shirt with me. I interviewed him for Willpower Doesn't Work. And he basically, I believe, is a master at applying all of the strategies I just gave you in the activate section. So basically what John Burke does is he is, I believe, 29 or 30 years old. He's written 8 albums. One of them was recently nominated for an Emmy. So he's becoming a very famous pianist. And he's written 8 albums. He's so prolific. He comes out with 1 or 2 a year now. But this is the process by which he creates an album. The first thing he does is he invests up front. So when he decides in his mind that it's time to create a new project, the first thing he does is he invests, because when he invests financially, he becomes committed emotionally. So the first thing he does is he calls his sound engineer, and I want you to take in mind, all of this stuff happens the day he decides. Again, he goes through a strong design phase, and where he gives himself the time where he's like, okay, this is what I want to do. He doesn't know exactly what he wants to do. He just knows that he wants to do a new project. And so he calls his sound engineer, the person where he goes to the studio and records the album, and he gets on the sound engineer's schedule for 3 months in advance. And he says, he gets on the calendar so that he knows in 3 months he's got to record the album. And then he pays in advance to actually have that spot. So now he's not only financially invested, but he's got an immediate timeline. He's got 3 months to write the album. And the reason I'm telling you this is because you can do so many things in 3 months. That's why these 3-month energy cycles are freaking awesome. If you actually apply these strategies and compel yourself forward and get committed and have pull motivation rather than push motivation, it's insane. But so immediately he has a shortened timeline. And if you've studied productivity, there's a concept called Parkinson's Law. Basically what it means is that the shorter the timeline, the faster you work. And then he starts filling out his calendar with creation time. He starts filling out his calendar with times when he's actually going to create the album. And if someone tries to get on his calendar during those times, he says no. He's got an appointment. He's got an appointment with himself. So he says no to great opportunities. And again, your career is actually what you say no to. That's what so many people have said. Steve Jobs, success is what you're willing to say no to. Even big, amazing opportunities. Jim Collins in Good to Great said once in a lifetime opportunities happen every day. But you have to be willing to say no to them in order to pursue your dreams. And then another thing that John Burke did to ensure that he went forward, and again, all this happens the same day. He invests up front, gets a short timeline, starts filling out his calendar, and then he creates social pressure by publicly committing and saying, hey, to all of his fans, because he cares what his fans think. He says, just letting you guys know I'm working on a new album and it's going to be out in 3 months. And so, just want to get you guys excited. And by the way, I'm going to be having a song come out in the next few weeks. And so he puts pressure on himself, external pressure, to actually produce. He's all of a sudden publicly committed that he needs to show up and produce, and he doesn't want to let his people down. And so he now has to produce. He puts himself in a point of no return position where now he has to go forward. That's what I call a forcing function. He forces himself to function how he wants to by creating situational factors that drive him forward. So John Burke's an amazing example. And what does it lead to? It leads to insane productivity and just being prolific and so creative and so successful. So another thing you must do in the activation stage is remove the distractions in your life. Even if that means friends and family, certain people who are bad influences. We become addicted to our environments that are filled with dopamine and things like that. So you need to remove the things in your life that are keeping you back. Jason Fried, he's the founder of Basecamp. And he said, I'm pretty oblivious to a lot of things intentionally. I don't want to be influenced that much. When you have a huge goal, when you're clear on what you want, you don't want things to derail you and take you off course. When you make a decision, it literally means you cut off other courses of action. So you have to embrace FOMO. You have to embrace not knowing. Like there's so much stuff on the internet and out in the world that you don't need to know. Almost all of it is trash. So decision fatigue is the enemy. Decision fatigue means you didn't actually make a decision. So when it comes to willpower, another definition of willpower is decision fatigue, and it means that you don't really know what you want. Because when you actually make a full-on commitment, then you've eliminated the other option. And most people, they haven't fully eliminated the option, the bad options, and so they're dealing with willpower. They're dealing with temptation. It's so much better just to eliminate the option. When you actually truly make a decision, you eliminate the option, which is why Jason Fried says, I'm oblivious to a lot of things intentionally. I don't want to be influenced. I've already made my decision. I don't need to deal with temptation. I don't need to deal with distraction. So that is how you activate. Final step in this system is to reinforce, then recover and repeat. So you can't actually take massive action, or you can't just make massive action. Because a lot of people at the beginning of the year, they make massive action. They buy the gym membership, for example. They start eating healthy, but it only lasts a little while because they don't have a system in place to reinforce it. That's why they quickly revert back. They revert back because their environment still holds them back in their past. They revert back because their emotions, because they're people. Everything reverts them. There's a reason why people don't change. So that's why you need a system to ensure you continue. You need a community. Neil Strauss got interviewed for one of Tim Ferriss's recent book, and he said the secret to change and growth is not willpower, but positive community. Gamification is a really cool, powerful way to reinforce what you're doing. That's why I'm challenging you to do 90-day challenges, and then you rest and let go. Gamification means you turn things into a game. You turn your whole life into a game. Daniel Coyle he's written a lot of really good books, but one of his books called The Little Book of Talent. And he talks about how all high performers, they gamify their lives. So this is what he said. He said, if you dig into the biography of any world-class performer, you'll uncover a story about small addictive games. If it can be counted, it can be turned into a game. And so he talks about like Warren Buffett, and he talks about all sorts of people who just turn goals into games. That's why 90-day challenges and experiments that are really imaginative and big are so much more fun, because if you can turn your life into a game where you can actually like clock how far you're doing, like you actually measure, did you do better than you did yesterday? Like if you're at the gym, if you can count it, it can be turned into a game. And so like for me, for example, as a blogger, it's like, all right, so how many words can I do today? Again, back to that Ezra Benson story. How much can you do today? You just turn life into a game. And that's basically the Ezra Benson story, is how much can you actually do? In order to reinforce who you want to be, you need to upgrade your peer group. Again, life is not about willpower, it's about community. There's a concept in psychology called the Pygmalion effect. Basically what it means is that we're either rising to or falling to the expectations of those around us. You're a product of your environment. Jim Rohn said you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You cannot reinforce good behavior if you're surrounded by people who are acting in the ways of your past. You just can't. Like, that is just completely true. You are literally the product of the people you spend the most time with. If you want to transform your life, you have to transform your community. And then daily journaling, which I've talked a lot about. Your morning journaling is what keeps you focused, and it reinforces your future identity. There's a concept that I love. This is one of my favorite quotes. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Basically, every morning, rather than jumping into your smartphone, if you took the time to write down your goals and then to mentally visualize them and emotionally assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, that is how you operate in a peak state. That's how you get yourself into a peak state every day, is you get yourself energized, you get yourself excited, you get yourself into a new environment. You get up early, because when you wake up early, all of a sudden you trigger all these powerful emotions and motivation and confidence, and you've made the first good decision, which ripples into other good decisions. And then you're visualizing and emotionally experiencing as if you achieved your goal. You're visualizing and emotionally experiencing what it would truly feel like to have the future you want. And then you operate from that feeling. And this concept is called be, do, have. Basically, most people are operating from their past when they immediately wake up. But instead, you want to operate from your future. You want to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Basically, you've got to be before you can do, and do before you can have. And how do you do that? You be the feeling. You be the person that has what you want. You feel what that person would feel. You assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and then you act from that future. You be the person, you feel what that person would feel, and you act that day, every day. Think about what would your life be like if every morning you put yourself into a peak state, you felt what it would feel like to have your dreams happen, and then you acted. You were that person, you did what that person would do, you would have what that person would have very quickly. You would act very differently than you would act if you were operating from your past. That is why confidence is created every single day. If you wake up reactively, jump into your smartphone, immediately you lose confidence. because confidence is the byproduct of your behavior. And if you wake up early, if you allow yourself space, clarity, you put yourself into that space, then immediately you're rippling confidence by small wins. Evening journaling, your evening routine is all about preparing your subconscious mind for the morning. That's why Thomas Edison said, never go to sleep without a request to your subconscious. At night, you need to unplug. You need to psychologically detach from work. You need to detach from your technology. You need to recover at night and give yourself space to recover. And then you spend time thinking about visualizing right before you go to bed, because that's when your subconscious mind is most fluid, your dreams. And while you're asleep, your subconscious mind and your brain will come up with so many creative solutions. And then if you give yourself space in the morning, you will come up with amazing answers. And then if you act on those answers, you're going to change your life very fast. You're going to be crystal clear, and you're going to make huge progress every single day. Your evening brain is analytical. That's why it's actually really good to think about your goals at night, because you actually start to get some really cool insights. So your recovery brain, if you actually give it time to recover, is primed for ideas, planning, and setting yourself up for success. But if you don't recover in the evening, your mornings are not going to be good. Recovery is the key to productivity, because productivity is not about time and effort. It's about results. It's about progress. And if you're recovered, and if you're clear, and if you're getting powerful creative insights, which can only come with a powerful creative primed mind and subconscious mind and brain, then you're going to come up with ideas and insights that are so much more powerful than if you're just moving forward every day. It's totally crazy, but your brain can come up with some amazing stuff. And if you change how you think, and if you change how you live, you can make more progress in 90 days than you probably have in 10 years, because you'd have a better brain that's producing better results. So this is what Caroline said, and this is super essential when it comes to pursuing new things, is to no longer consider failures. But through consistent journaling, I've been able to process how I'm feeling and why. When I have an off day, I'm able to coach myself and get myself back up and start. So she's shortened her refractory periods. She doesn't allow herself to get stuck in the past. Because of daily journaling, I have a record of the many times this year I have chosen to make a plan and follow through. I no longer beat myself up and think of myself as a failure. In fact, I no longer see failures, but instead see course corrections. And I stay aware of the needed course corrections by journaling daily. So the goal of reinforcement is to experience what psychologists and brain scientists call automaticity. Automaticity means that your desired behavior becomes automatic. It means that you have a permanent change in your biology and environment. Basically, it's where life becomes a habit. Who you wanted to be becomes who you are. And you can do that every 90 days if you're acting and if you're reinforcing it. You can literally transform who you are every 90 days. And it can be automatic. It can become automatic. And you have a new emotional state based on your future, not your past. Therefore, you have a changed you. And this is why Leonardo DiCaprio said every next level of your life will require a different you. This is the 4-step process. This is how you can transform your life every 3 months. That's why Albert Einstein said the measure of intelligence is the ability to change. So here's what we've covered so far. You need clarity and recovery to have, you need recovery in order to have clarity and to be able to do deep work. That's why we're doing 90-day sprints and recovery. We've talked about how to shift your identity from your past to your future through daily journaling. We've talked about how important it is to reinforce your future identity by redesigning your life and your environment. So basically, after I've just given you a plethora of incredible concepts, my question is if you applied these 90-day sprints, how different would your life be? If you took profound action on only those things which matter most, if you were actually climbing up the right ladder, what would happen in your life? Were you happy that you came to this webinar today? Were you happy with the concepts I've shared? Are these things useful, or is this just a bunch of mumbo jumbo? Can you see yourself utilizing these principles starting immediately? Would you agree that if you implemented one tiny thing I showed you today, that you'd see dramatic, measurable improvement in any area of your life you'd choose to apply this knowledge? Would you like to spend even more time together going deeper and further on how you could make your wildest dreams a reality? That is what AMP is all about. You've heard the testimonials. I'm opening this course back up, and it's a 52-week life-changing training. Unlike other online courses, this is a mentoring program that goes for a whole year. There's 4 energy cycles. It's a year-long experience that starts with core content. And then I give you weekly trainings with specific tools and strategies for making massive progress every single week towards your 90-day sprints. The reason New Year's resolutions don't work is because they're like a marathon. You have to instead approach life like a sprint with checkpoints. Then you rest, you recover. That's why this 52-week program, AMP, is based on 3-month energy cycles. And you get 4 energy cycles throughout the year. And you have this epic community and all these epic trainings. It's a system that scientifically will help you be engaged and motivated for a full year. I wanted to create a 52-week program because I had taken so many online courses where they just gave me a bunch of information up front. And there's a lot of research that shows that when people buy courses or programs, 70% of the people don't even make it past the first module. It's basically the exact same concept as New Year's resolutions. It doesn't work. So I wanted to design a system, an experience that was scientifically proven to keep people engaged. That's why in AMP, we do 90-day contests. And you get to start over every 90 days. It's like having a New Year's resolution every 90 days. So that whether you're in March or August or April, it doesn't really matter. You have the same motivation as you had in January because you're sprinting towards a 90-day goal. Then you reassess where you are. Every 90 days, we're going to do recovery. Then you measure the gain, not the gap. And when you measure the gain, you get confidence because you're blown away by how much you made progress because you're actually investing in yourself and you're actually moving forward. Then you get to redesign every 90 days. So what AMP is it's 4 3-month energy cycles. Energy cycles are 90-day sprints, and you get 4 of them because there's 4 quarters in a year. Every 90 days, you get to start a new energy cycle. You go through these 4 steps, and this is how you learn self-mastery, because you learn that you can master life, you can master learning, you can learn what you don't know, and you can continually experience those prediction errors. You get good with uncertainty. You have a system that keeps you going. You have a gamified life, and you have a powerful community. So every 90 days, you put the past behind you, and you start with a clean slate. Because remember, whether you've had success in the past, like the astronauts, or whether you've had failure in the past, if you attach to that past, that's where you get stuck. And every 90 days, you need to move forward. That's how you continually learn. This is all based on learning and development and growth. It's based on science and motivation and confidence and momentum. This is the product of years and years of study. So by the end of the first 90 days in AMP, you'll have taken more action towards your biggest goals than you have in years. You'll have completely upgraded your environment and relationships. You'll have created powerful morning and evening routines that ensure you have clarity and direction every single day. You'll know how to operate at peak levels throughout your day and have seemingly endless energy. You'll know how to manage your emotional state and how to catch yourself when you're falling back into old cycles. You'll have the tools, the strategy, the accountability, and the community to rely on when things get tough. And by the way, things will get very tough if you're approaching life at this level that I've described to you in this training, where you're taking on these huge sprints, where you're living life as an experiment, where you're living life seeking growth, where you're seeking prediction errors, where you're embracing uncertainty, where you're seeking freedom, where you're not living from your past, but where you're approach-oriented and you're seeking curiosity and imagination. I'm telling you, if you do it, you're going to go through a lot of emotional highs and lows because you're not experiencing the stability of your past. You're stepping out. And the reason you need strategy tools, a community, and you need a system is because you need to stay reinforced in what you're doing. And if you fall back into old ways, it's going to keep you stuck. Again, in the first 90 days, you're going to know how to create the emotions you want to experience to live life at the highest possible level. You're going to be able to assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. You're going to learn how to visualize and use your journal in highly specific ways that will help you not only get clarity, but commit to and create your biggest dreams. And this is what I've been doing for 10 years. I've been applying this journaling system, all these emotional regulation systems, designing life as a game, not a grind, measuring the gain, not the gap. You're going to have more confidence than you've ever had because you'll have lived with more integrity than you ever have. You'll have more motivation than you've ever had because you'll be continually accumulating small wins every single day, which create more momentum. You'll know how to shatter your unconscious, subconscious, and unhealthy blocks and shape an inner world to create your ideal outer world. You'll know how to break past the emotional blocks and traumas that have kept you stuck in the past and learn to experience true freedom. You can't be free without stepping into the emotional trauma and without stepping into the unknown future. For potentially the first time in your life, you'll experience deep peace because you'll no longer fear missing out. Like Jason Fried, you'll intentionally be uninformed by all the garbage out in the world. You'll know how to make the best and boldest decisions possible, and you'll know when and where to make those decisions. We'll talk about the science of decision making. You'll become the master of your time and your life because you'll have learned how to get clarity and to prioritize only those things which matter to you. You'll be able to achieve your goals 10x faster because you'll know what not to pursue. You'll know what to pursue, and you'll know how to get it almost immediately. You'll gain the confidence to immediately delete all the things in your life that are holding you back. You'll develop what psychologists call a high tolerance for ambiguity, where you embrace uncertainty and difficult emotions. This is what all high performers have. They have a tolerance, which means they become comfortable with uncertainty, with ambiguity. They are so comfortable in situations where you don't know the answer. And kids, by the way, there's so much research about kids and how they are fine in situations that they don't know, because again, they're open to new experiences. They're embracing learning all the time and prediction errors. They're fine in situations where they don't know the answer. That's why they're so creative and imaginative. And in even the first 90 days, you'll get so much more because you'll be transforming from the outside in and from the inside out. You will learn more in the first 90 days of AMP and in this program than you potentially have in a decade. You'll make more progress in the first 90 days than you've probably made in a really, really long time, in years. So in a nutshell, you're going to learn how to get clarity for what truly matters to you. You're going to learn how to design your life so that you can consistently create desired results. You'll know how to redesign yourself to get what you want, whether that's millions of dollars, a successful business, to travel the world. You're going to redesign yourself. You'll have the tools, the strategy, the system, the community, and ongoing support to transform your life in 1 year. This is a 52-week experience, 4 3-month energy cycles. It's not just a course where you get a bunch of information. This will be the most explosive and transformative year of your life. So here's what's included. You're going to get a bunch of core content that's going to give you the foundation for how to actually, take this deeper. What I've taught you in this webinar is the foundation, it's the basics, but you need core content that you can consume regularly so that you can make this your foundation. And then you get weekly trainings. Every week I put out new stuff that gives you more tools to keep going. There's monthly assignments and challenges. Again, this is the gamified life. And you get to design your own challenges. You get to publicly, I have a reporting and an accountability system to ensure that you're actually moving forward. And as a community, we engage in certain challenges. There's tracking and assignments. There's tools and prompts that I give you to help you get clarity and take bold action. And then there's follow-up if you fall off. So if you stop reporting your progress, if you stop submitting the assignments, we're going to know. And so we're going to reach out to you and say, what the heck happened? Where are you? You stopped reporting. You stopped being accountable to the system, to the program. Are you not moving forward on your goals? This is something that we really care about because we care about this community and we care about retention, and we want you to be reinforced, because trying new goals, trying big things is freaky. It's a reason why people stay stuck. And so we are constantly going to do everything we can to make sure you're still coming. You've got audio files of all of the training so that you can have them on the go. Whether you're working out or whether you're in your car, you get audios of all the training, because repetition is the father of learning, and it's how you reshape your subconscious. So this is what Nicholas said. He said, by joining, I have acquired an accountability partner and community, which has both motivated me and brought me back to pursuing my goals. If someone is looking to find a community of people trying to gain back their life, change their life for the better, or supercharge their life, having a community supporting them and showing how it is possible is great, which AMP provided for me. That's what Nicholas said. And by the way, there's a bunch of bonuses that come with AMP. So the first bonus is obviously that you get a private mastermind community. You get to surround yourself with a bunch of people who are living at this level, who are taking life on at the next level, who are, high achievers. And in this community, you share your ideas, you share the things you're learning, you publicly commit to your goals, and you be super vulnerable about your losses and your failures. And you perhaps find friends that can give you an ear where you can let your trauma out, where you can share the things that have kept you stuck. That you get this mastermind community. Bonus number 2, you get tailored support. Whoever joins AMP immediately gets a survey where we can learn about, your demographics, about what your age is, about what your profession is, about what your goals are, so that we can match you up with people who are relevant, whether that be accountability partners or community. Bonus number 3, expert interviews. One of the things that I'm really lucky to have is that I'm lucky to have access to a lot of powerful influencers, because just my work has been influential, because I've been able to develop basically an amazing network. I have access to a lot of really hard to get to people. But this isn't like a podcast. All the people who I interview are very clear that the people that they're doing this interview for are people who are high achievers. They're people who are pushing boundaries and making huge progress. And they're people who are invested in themselves. Almost everyone I interview, the first question they say is, are these people invested? Because if you're not invested, you're not for real. Only the people who invest in themselves are for real. And when a person is invested in themselves, that's a huge signal that they're moving forward in their life. That's when they're making the shift from dreamer to doer. And so because they're invested, these interviews are tailored for an elite audience. They're not generalized like a podcast. They're very much focused. They're intense. They're deep. This is an interview I did with Darren Hardy. But if you have requests for people I should interview, chances are I can probably get them because I've got access to a lot of people. Bonus number 4, group coaching sessions. One of the things we're constantly doing in AMP is getting feedback on where people are struggling, on what they need help with. And then we take that